Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second live episode of the Musari Show. Thanks so much for joining. Please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. We do also have a live chat. Feel free to drop in your thoughts here on the live chat. Before we get into it, I'd like to really send my thoughts and prayers to people in my hometown, Mozambique. Right before I did repost the new time this morning, I did get the news that the Constitutional Council did announce the winner, the de facto winner of the 2024 elections, which is the people who the majority do not perceive to be the legit winner. I don't want to get too much into opinions on this, but I do hope and pray that you and your family are keeping safe during this very probably turbulent times. So as we get into it, I'd like to introduce the guest that we have today. So he's a great friend of mine who's really been an inspiration for the time that I have known him. He is the CEO and co-founder of Lipaworld, which is a venture-backed startup in New York City. It's a rising star in New York City, and he's on a mission to revolutionize financial inclusions for immigrants. So Lipaworld provides innovative solutions such as stablecoin, P2P wallets, and digital voucher marketplaces, and is tailored specifically to needs of the diaspora, not only the African diaspora, but I believe it's going to expand beyond that. And through his leadership, the company has secured venture capital backing, it's built strategic partnerships, and has also cultivated growing customer base. I also did learn a couple of months ago that from the rising, in fact, from the remittance businesses in New York City, Lipaworld was considered to be top 6. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome our guest today, Mr. Jonathan Katende. Jonathan, it's really exciting to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much, and I hope you can hear me clearly, and equally inspired by what you guys are doing. I'm sorry, and thank you for your support.
No, sure. That's really great to have you. So, you and I do talk quite a bit, and I have followed sort of like the early stages of your journey, and I've seen very fast evolution. And one of the things that we did talk about was the reason why you do what you do. We did talk about the book Start With Why by Simon Sinek, and you have expounded and broken down to me why you did this. So would you like to maybe start by letting the audience know the why behind Lipaworld and behind the vision and mission?
Yeah, thank you so much. So I think for the most part, being an immigrant, a two-time immigrant, having moved to South Africa with my family and growing up there, now moving again with my family to the US. This was a pain point that I had, and what I quickly realized is that many others had the same pain point that I had, which was, how to remit your loved ones for its intended purpose. And when sort of looking deeper into some of those layers, I realized that, there was a whole untapped market for many immigrants that were undocumented and that couldn't receive remittances. So this idea really started to snowball into a business when I realized that, I could provide a solution through this digital voucher marketplace, which is what we essentially built the business out of at the beginning. We've then sort of expanded into additional sort of product lines such as the stablecoin wallet, which I can go into. But for the most part, it was really, a few things. How do I send money for its intended purpose? And how do I make sure that money or that value gets used for what I need it to be used for? We all know those stories of people sending money and, you've got this big investment that you're looking forward to seeing in December, and you arrive and it's really, dilapidated, infrastructural location. So, there's a lot of pain points that I think many of us as immigrants have, and the solution essentially allows them to be empowered through this marketplace.
No, that's really awesome. So I actually do remember a story of someone who was a former banker, and he kind of tapped into the growing trend of the remittance business. And today he is the CEO and co-founder of a massive remittance business in the United States, and there's huge volume into other continents. So in your side, what would you say that how does Lipaworld sort of like distinguish or set itself apart from other competitors in the remittance business? Because it's quite impressive to see that in a short space of time you've garnered enough attention in the city to be ranked among the top ones.
Yeah. I mean, and it's an honor, and it's really through the support of people like you and some of our customers who have trusted us to use our services. But this idea around Lipaworld was really how do we redefine remittances for people? And we sort of started to coin this term productized remittances, and it's really sort of been built around the use case for the individual remittance that is required back home. So across our marketplace we have varied categories, whether it's groceries, utility bill payments, healthcare, or travel, which allows people to control how that remittance is being used, and it sort of provides you full transparency end to end in terms of how your recipient uses those essential goods and services. So, for example, in Nigeria, we've partnered with an incredible team and company called Kari that processes multiple billions of dollars in transactions, getting people around Lagos and interstate travel using the Kari card. And that's a product that I'm very passionate about, that I think will do really well for the diaspora, the Nigeria diaspora specifically. And then, in some other use cases, we have companies like Checkups in Kenya, who we've also partnered with, that are doing incredible work on the ground, providing, essential services for loved ones that need healthcare benefits. And there again, we're trying to unlock a lot of opportunities for the diaspora, for the loved ones back home. And then fairly recently, we've also looked to partner with nonprofits. And this is really also something that's very close to my heart in assisting, impact-driven initiatives on the continent, like the one we've done with NABU in South Africa to drive financial education through some of the initiatives. So all in all, I think where we differentiate ourselves, and to answer really your question, is that we are tailored made for what the consumer needs back home, and we provide a direct sort of link to those SMEs and businesses that look to receive those services from us from abroad.
Yes, indeed. And I remember from our initial discussion, the thing that kind of got my attention about your business is that you send more than money. So when I thought remittance, I thought sending money. And one of the things that I've noticed that has evolved in your business over time is, initially I thought you would send money directly, and I picked up that, you actually send vouchers to, people that can acquire goods and services from retailers in South Africa, and it's also expanded to other markets. So what kind of drove you? What sort of inspired you or motivated you to focus more on remittance of vouchers versus actual money?
Yeah, so I think, there was a big thesis that I had in my mind, and it really came from my experience working as a tech operator on the continent. And for the most part, I had direct view of how big the offline market was, particularly the informal market. As you may know, close to about 80% of the economy is in the informal sector, right? But remittance within the traditional aspect of how it's been built hasn't been able to reach those audiences and those customers. And what we started to see, particularly in South Africa, is this huge amount of opportunity in the informal sector across vouchers. And these vouchers could allow people to access digital products, which they weren't able to in the past, such as your Spotify's and those international sort of type of content, because many of them were unbanked and weren't as financially included in mainstream economy. So I saw an opportunity there that I believe strongly could be applicable in the informal sector across multiple sub-Saharan African countries. And when you look at really the underlying tech, it's not very dissimilar to mobile money and how it operates. So for us, I think it's a big bet on saying, how do we service the offline consumer on the continent exactly where they are? Because I think this notion of expecting people to go to main city centers to literally withdraw cash and then do what they want is very outdated and is very costly, right? But today with Lipaworld, you can literally get your Kari card topped up and travel. Imagine not having travel money to get money, but you can do that with us. And more importantly, you can sort of buy milk, bread through your local vendors. So, through one of our partners in South Africa, flash operated spaza shops, you can then start receiving goods and essential services through your mom and pop shop, 2 minutes down from where you live without having to go too far. So we're really driving, a lot of democratization of the usage of remittances. And I think that's really important. And I think that's where we are mostly driving a lot of impact. And I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, so that's indeed very exciting to hear. And one of the things that excited me was the business started with a couple of very key and strategic retailers in South Africa.
Right.
And that has expanded to retailers in Kenya, Nigeria, other countries. Tell us a bit about the journey of expanding in terms of the base of retailers that you work with, and how that has been going so far, how the journey of the expansion has been.
Yeah, it's been an incredible journey with a lot of challenges, of course. But I think with any marketplace business, it's usually two-sided, supply and demand. And I think for the most part, where we've seen immediate, traction was from our partners. So a lot of the retailers that we speak to, a lot of sort of our merchants that we have on our marketplace understand the benefits of the African diaspora. And for many of them, they want access to that sort of customer base because they don't. A lot of them don't have digital, forefronts. A lot of them can't receive, foreign currency for various reasons, and we simplify that in many ways. And I think they're really excited at the idea and the prospect of receiving, remittances from abroad, from someone who may have been, for example, a ShopRite customer when they were in South Africa, who then moved abroad, but still knows that that's the product of choice for his loved ones back home. So we are really making sure that, those funds are staying within the ecosystem that really produce, economic development. So, there's a full circle value add to how we sort of, support those economies.
Sure, that's great. And one of the very prominent topics in discussion in the startup community and a lot of the business accelerators and incubators is the aspect of funding, right?
Yeah.
And that's a highly spoken about topic in books that you read. They normally tell you that they look at the profile of the founder themselves. They look at the profile of the team. Do they have a good CTO? Is the product really good? And from my experience and from what I've seen around, I do talk a lot to the investment community quite a bit in the United States, and they tend to have concerns around the currency risk whenever they invest in any sort of venture that's Africa related. And to hear that Lipaworld has been successful in securing venture funding for a business that is pretty much based around remittances of vouchers from the U.S. to Africa. That there must have been a very convincing business case. So how has the process of securing funding been? Something that is very challenging, even for a lot of very good businesses and startups in the United States that struggle to get that.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think there's a few things. It was extremely challenging, particularly in the sort of cycle of fundraising that we're in right now. But there's sort of a few things I want to highlight that I thought were very useful for us, and one was that it's a trust game, and I think for the most part, many investors want to know whether if they give you a dollar, you can use it wisely and you won't run away with their money. So that's point number one. Point number two, I think for me, I think there's an aspect of resilience that needs to be demonstrated, and for the most part, it takes a few months to years of you constantly, chipping down at each thing. And I promise you, if I show you our initial MVP and how we started to where we are now, there's been a dramatic sort of development in the amount of time and resources we put ourselves personally and with our team members and their time. And I think once investors start to see that, you won't give up tomorrow, then they're willing to back you. So I think for me, it's a fundamental of that, and having a scalable business that, you can prove, whether it's, through the partners that you invest or, the customer base that you sort of grow over time. I think that sort of helps you. But for me, coupling all those three things I kind of mentioned, I think that's what's helped us. And we're very grateful to our investor for really coming on board and seeing this opportunity because it's not easy. But I urge anyone to just keep going. I think that's really the moral of the story for me.
No, that's an excellent answer. And for my conversations with the investment community as well, their thought process or one of their criteria for the startups that they invest in is they want to be sure that for every dollar they invest, they're going to get probably 10, 20, or even
Right.
more dollars back. So, what would you consider to be some of the top three factors of Lipaworld's business model, apart from the profile of the startup team that kind of convinced them to back the venture?
Yeah, look, I think there were many things. I think for one, it's the category that we play in. I think we are doing something completely different. So I would argue that, for many remittance, pitch decks that you see, when you see Lipaworld, you see something completely different. And I know of one, if not two companies doing something very similar to us, in North America, if we even being quite frank. So I think that differentiation was super super key, and I think you also have to have a bit of an eye on the future, somewhat, because for the most part, when we went into this business, we saw what the future could look like and what our platform would do, and I think when looking at the existing landscape, how can you essentially build something that has a wedge in the market that could be a substantial company over time. And there are demonstrative examples that we've sort of brought to the tables to show other companies that have done something similar, although slightly different, who were acquired by companies like MasterCard as an example. And I think for us, that IP and that infrastructure that we're building, I think for itself, is valuable. And I think investors of the future who understand that, see Lipaworld as an opportunity for them to get a very good return. So for me, I'm looking at, our company mission, which is democratizing remittances and driving financial inclusion. And yes, we look at becoming a very scalable and profitable company. But I think everything follows as long as we sort of maintain that trajectory.
Sure, that's really insightful. So whenever I talk to founders, I like to get their views on the issues of funding, right?
Yeah.
So on one hand, I have spoken to founders who have successfully bootstrapped their businesses. I know one non-tech founder of a non-tech business in Texas that is worth over $100 million, and he believes in not having any investors. So he bootstrapped his way up. On the other hand, in the startup community, the whole paradigm of eventually building a convincing case to secure funding is very prominent. So, as a founder yourself with the experience, what would you say to a younger entrepreneur who's weighing the pros and cons of being funded versus not being funded? And in what cases would you consider securing funding from venture capitals or angel investors to be critical?
Yeah, it's a very subjective case. And why I say that is because bootstrapping for many may have been relevant in a different cycle. So, for example, we know the story of Zoho, the CRM, and how they bootstrapped their company to where they are. I don't know if they could do that today, for example. So I think timing is super critical, and I think the industry that you play in is also another important factor, right? And for me, the way I see it is that for Lipaworld to get to where it wants to be, which is $100 million revenue generating business, I think there are certain fundamentals that are required for us to get to that point, and doing it via bootstrap is not enough, right, to get to that milestone. And I think that's where venture capital money comes in, because it aligned directly with their economic incentives, right? So having more than 10x return on the capital that they invested in us, they can't do that unless they invest in companies with that sort of aspiration. So for us, it's making sure that two and two align. And the truth is, not every company needs venture capital money. I think there's also that. And I've been in discussions with other founders, and some have actually realized that maybe I don't know if I want to raise venture capital money. Maybe I just want to be very comfortable with 10 million $10 million in revenue, and that's okay. That's really okay. But it's an extremely subjective sort of decision that you have to make for yourself, for your peace, and know the type of energy you want to be part of, because we go intentively into this VC, and I guess this hamster wheel, some would call it, willingly. We don't do it by accident. We absolutely live and breathe what we do every day, and you can't do that unless that's the type of individual that you are. So yeah, for anyone looking to go into building a venture-backed business, if you're not working 7 days a week and you're not accessible for your business, then yeah, it's probably not for you. But that's a personal decision one needs to make.
Yeah, sure. That fully makes sense. Because once I read that a SaaS company, a Mailchimp, which is a email marketing company, apparently they bootstrapped their way up. On the other hand, I have looked at Amazon. I've looked at the early financials, and I remember, if my memory doesn't fail me, in '95 they had revenue of like $500,000. They made losses. The following year, they had revenue of like $15 million, grew exponentially, but they made losses in the millions. And the following year, I think they had revenue of $147 million, but they still made huge losses. And I believe it was around 1997 when they got listed in the stock exchange, and they had access to a lot of equity capital as a listed company. And that kind of helped to finance the losses in the first years of the business. So it seems to be a very, very highly debated topic and really subjective, as you did say.
Yeah,
So
and just to add, if you don't mind, it's also important to to highlight, the awkward question, which is, friends and family around, right? Because I think for the most part, for underrepresented founders like us, when you look at our counterparts, like you just mentioned, Amazon had a 250K angel investment. And I believe it was from his parents or something like that. And the thing is, how many founders of color have access to that capital within their immediate circle? So I think that's also super important, because it actually it brings back a thought that I had from another founder that he spoke about mental runway, and mental runway is so critical to you doing well as a company and as a founder, because if you're looking for your next meal for the week while building a business, that's very, very hard. But when you come off from a fairly decent family where you can actually work off that garage, some people don't have garages, that becomes a luxury, and I think there needs to be those real conversations to be had, as well as that how could these people do that. There's a bit of privilege that comes into it, and I think that also just clarifies a lot for many people, and it should help them sort of understand what they're getting into. Yeah.
yes, you actually read my mind, and you actually highlighted the point that was going to be my next question, which is because obviously we've seen case studies of founders that come from more privileged backgrounds. They're able to secure $5,000, $10,000 from friends and family members, and then you find people that not only come from less privileged backgrounds, but given the family dynamics and cultural issues, it's not really conducive or comfortable to have such a conversation where quite huge checks are asked for a venture with no guarantee of success.
Right.
So you've done a really good job at predicting my follow-up question, I must say.
Yeah, and it's, I think it's important, and I've benefited from this type of information coming out, and I think the more we make it available for many people like us trying to do the next thing, I think it serves them. So it's my pleasure.
Sure, that's great. So basically, as a remittance business, you're in the fintech segment. So obviously, here we probably have entrepreneurs who are either in the journey or considering a journey in the field of fintech, and finding yourself in a similar place. They could be based in New York City, it could be based somewhere else. So what would be, let's say, the top three pointers you would give them as advice in their journey?
Oh, it's again a highly subjective, question, and I think I can only bring it as close to my experience as I can, and hopefully that rings a bell to someone. But I think one of the key things is, finding those nodes of or those tech hubs, where you can build your company out of. When looking back at our journey and where we still are, I don't think we could have built a business like this in any other city in the world, in my opinion. So I think, New York and everything that comes with it, from a resource development perspective, access to information, that's super, super critical. And the pool of funding as well, I think, is also super, super critical. So I think establish, how you can get in the game, with peers that you can compete with, because I can also, be quite transparent in saying that, being in an industry or in an ecosystem that is highly competitive will make you a better founder. There's no doubt about it, because you are up against the best of the best. And I think for the most part, if you can get yourself there, I think that's a privilege in itself, but I think that's very useful. And I think, we're also very lucky these days to have, the internet and the ability to participate in accelerators and communities from anywhere in the world. So, if you can't get there physically, I think there's still an element of you being part of those ecosystem, provided you do your research and provided you have that resilience and the trust factor, to build a name for yourself. So, fundamentally, it's up to the individual and the grit level. I think that's the one thing I would say that is super pertinent to me, and how one can succeed.
Sure, that's a very insightful answer. So, as we speak, there is a book that I'm reading. It's a book called The Startup Community Way. And it kind of highlights a case study of how the startup community what developed in Boulder, Colorado. It went from a city that wasn't recognized as a startup kind of destination to eventually becoming a major startup community. If my memory doesn't fail me, that's where Techstar was founded. And today we have Techstar hubs in major cities such as New York. I believe they've expanded to Boston. I think they're also in Detroit, and they've built a very strong and national ecosystem. And one of the points that really stuck out in reading that book is they highlighted that startup communities need to be a bottom up kind of thing, kind of dynamic, and not top down. In other words, it needs to be the actual community of entrepreneurs that have a common interest of building the community that are driving the agenda, and not a large organization like a large corporation or government. So, how has being part of that community been for you, and how has that practically contributed to the development of your venture?
Yeah, that's an astute, observation, and I think, for the most part, it's about, who speaks about you when you're not in the room. And I think when you build those connections within those said ecosystems, it becomes a reference point for that trust that I spoke about at the beginning. And I think, I'm very intentional about being authentic, and, committing in executing everything that we say we're going to do, and making sure that, no matter where you go, you serve people with integrity. And I think when people have that reputation for you as a founder and your business, then I think it becomes so much easier for an introduction, or, someone potentially wanting to invest in your business, because there's a reference point for this individual. So I think, whether you're an introvert, or an extrovert, I think you, particularly as a CEO, you have to be extremely socially aware to participate in these communities. Even if you're the only, black and brown person in the room, I think you have to really connect with people, and, you have to really represent yourself in the best possible way. So for me, whether it's New York or it's even the state of Delaware, where, we got our first type of ground funding from, those are people that have helped us in our journey, and we look to give back, in those said communities as we grow. And, we'll be again in Delaware in January for diaspora event. And I think, it's really building those relationships, in an authentic way, and making sure that people can just say, this is the company that, we can trust, and, represent us. Because at the end of the day, word of mouth is so important, and and your reputation can be broken any day. So for me, that's something I'll just say, focus your attention on.
Spot on. So as we wrap up the show, we hit the 30-minute mark. How can people find a Lipaworld service? And I've also known that you have an online community where you also produce content.
Yeah, so you can find us on www.lipaworld.com. It's LIPA world, one word.com. All our social channels are there. We do have also a community of events that we typically like to do. So we have, a Diaspora Connect event that we do at least once a year when we can, and many smaller mixes. And this is our opportunity to really engage with our communities. Those that are new, but those also that are friends and who have supported us. And it's really a time for everyone to come together, listen to an amazing speaker, and really start to drive that togetherness as a communities. Which I think we don't have too much of that, to be honest. It's really sort of segregated, and I think as an African community, we don't typically all come as one. And I think that's sort of environment we're trying to build, because within those communities, I think that's where opportunities can unlock themselves. And I'm very happy to see that, even if it's not Lipaworld benefiting from it. I think just having people with like-minded, interests can come together on the day, engage with each other. So our Lipaworld community events happen quite often, and as we sort of try to broaden ourselves across different states, we'll be doing many more in the upcoming months. So I'll also add our link to our community page where you can just follow us and look out for the next event soon.
No, perfect. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us on the show. It's really been insightful. I must say that it's really a privilege to follow the journey from close and seeing things evolve, seeing Lipaworld build clout, and seeing people benefit from it. At the end of the day, it's a real need that is being served. I will be sharing the Luma link as well in case anybody wishes to join the community that is based in New York City. And as we expand to other cities, we'll be able to join as well. Once again, thank you so much for joining us, Jonathan. And to those who are watching, please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. That is the best way to help us spread our content across the universe. Thank you so much for everyone for joining, and thank you so much, Jonathan.
Thank you, everybody, and happy holidays.